March 31, 2022, which is a virtual meeting by Zoom. And I will call that meeting to order. And with that, Mrs. Milton, will you call the roll? Is Mrs. Milton here, or shall we? Okay, thank you, Marilyn.
Yeah, Mr. Slocum.
Here.
Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh is here. Mr. Burway.
Present.
Mr. Jinks.
Here.
Mr. Mylone.
Here.
Ms. Nichols.
Here.
Ms. Pavano.
Here.
Mr. Talbot is absent. Mr. Villabur.
Present.
We have a quorum present.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Marilyn. We will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you and welcome again. I would like to just point out that for the record, even though we're all being recorded, we also have in attendance with us tonight John Parati, who chairs the WPCA. We have John Cronin, who's currently acting as director at the plant, and other members of staff as well, as we'll see going along. We have tonight an intro. Before we get into the operating budget, David, we have the approval of a bid waiver for 2 progressive cavity pumps for the wastewater treatment plant. I wanted to dispatch with that very important vote, but I also wanted to give, and I think it's appropriate because John is here, after we introduce a motion, which is before us, John, you may want to speak to that. Anyone else may want to speak to that, town manager, whoever on staff level. And then I would like to welcome any questions from members of the council at this time. So with that, I'd like someone to introduce that. Why don't we go to you, Don?
Put that up on the screen.
Yeah, Don, if you could introduce the motion as liaison to the PBC.
Sure,
and
okay.
I mean Don Walsh, that is.
Got it. Be it resolved that town council approves resolution number 033122-01, whereas the Public Works Department and WPCD recommend awarding a contract for 2 progressive cavity pumps to remove sludge from the rotary drum thickeners and transport it to the digester to Aqua Solutions, Inc. And whereas Aqua Solutions, Inc. is the only supplier that can provide a pump that will fit the available space without more costly modifications to the pedestals and connections. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the town council pursuant to section 7-8C11 of the town charter approves the waiver of bid for the contract not to exceed $50,000 to Aqua Solutions, Inc. for 2 progressive cavity pumps.
Second.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Villabur, for the second discussion. With that, I think I'll first introduce George or John Parati, whoever would like to speak to this. George, I know you probably worked on the bid process closely.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is a request. As many of you know, there's been an issue with the plant with the rotary drum thickeners, which are a method of kind of taking the solids out of the process, if you will, and moving them to a digester where they can compost, essentially. These pumps are for that process. They apparently were undersized from the design point on 7 years ago, and have not functioned since probably some early testing. So they've been identified as being undersized, and now the hope is to get 2 new pumps that will allow these digesters to be put back into service, or I'm sorry, the rotary drum thickeners to be put back into service, and it will also help with our issue that we'll be talking about later tonight with the notice of violation with suspended solids in the plant.
John, did you have anything to add?
No,
Mr. Parati?
no further comments.
Okay.
We'll talk about the status of all the other items that we're going to be reviewing, at when that time comes up. We also have
Okay.
Jason Beach, who's the chair, vice chair of the WPCA also.
Welcome, Jason, and thank you for attending. Now, with that, George, just based on your sort of statement and backed up by John, you want to basically talk about the whole remediation plan as well as the budget itself later in the budget process?
Correct. We've put that in as part of our presentation. So if
That's terrific.
we can
So-
go into as much detail as the council likes.
And I think that's great. But as far as my colleagues are concerned, are you satisfied? You have enough information to vote on this bid waiver at the moment? Okay, well, that being, Mr. Mylone, if you had a question, you're muted.
Thanks, Tim. And I suspect I know the answer, but I think it'd be nice for the record to hear this. George or John, since this is the only company that manufactures, do we have any sense of the price of these pumps for a similar pump with a different manufacturer that we can be assured that they're reasonably priced?
They are reasonably priced. The issue that comes down to is when we'd have to start making special adapters, plates, face plates. These are essentially a bolt-in, and town staff will be able to replace them, as opposed to, designing something new that we have to get a subcontractor and other people. And kind of also where, as we'll discuss, under the NOB, we really don't want to push any delays in any of these things.
Right. So it sounds like it's an Apple charger for an Apple phone. Okay. Did you have a question, Mr. Jinks?
Yeah, just a real quick question, maybe for George. The old pumps or the current pumps, do they have any kind of, once they come out, do they have any kind of secondary market value? Is there recycling done to these? Is there anything coming back to the town for those pumps in any way?
We could certainly auction them and do something. They unfortunately have light use, so they should be pretty desirable in today's market because there's a lot of shortages out there.
Okay, great. It's good to know.
No, Jim, I think that's an excellent question because I'm on a policy board at the Water Authority, and that was one question that came up on a big purchase, and some of our RPP members were shooting for and emphasizing the value of these recycled pieces. That there is more value than you might think. So, George, I think that's definitely a very good thing to absolutely be able to report on whenever you get to report on it. In fact, your vendor may have an interest in a repurchase, but again, that's thank you, Jim, for bringing that up. That's a very important piece of this. I agree. Okay, is everyone satisfied at this point so that we can vote on this matter? Okay, all those in favor of the motion before us signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, this motion carries with a vote of 8-0. Okay, very good. We now, Mr. Bowery, I'm going to, with great ease, turn this meeting over to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor Slocum. I appreciate that. And we are ready to continue our review of the town operating budget and the various departments. Tonight, we're scheduled for Public Works, Parks, Water Pollution Control, Public Property, and Recreation. And I would first ask Mr. Kimball if we want to do Water Pollution Control so that Mr. Beach and Mr. Parati don't have to stay while we do the rest of them. Is that all right with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the plan, is to start with them first. And so I think we'll just dive right in terms of the page for everybody as we get to the horizontal proposed budget book. The WPCD Special Revenue Fund section of the budget is on page 130. About 129 is the summary page, and 131 are the line items for folks to flip to the relevant pages. And as George said, I think we'll dive in. And if we need to advance a little bit, George, into the WPCD section, just tell me where to go in your slides and I can share it when you're ready. But if you want to start, George, with an introduction on anything, and let me know when you want me to share the screen.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Again, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody virtually, I guess, and hope everybody's well. George Nowotny, Director of Public Works and Engineering. And as this has been said a few times, but I'm joined by some of our guests tonight, John Parati of the WPCA, Jason Beach of the WPCA, John Cronin, who's our acting superintendent at present, And Dennis Divert Jr. is on the call somewhere. So we have a whole host of folks who can talk to some issues as they come up. If you want to put up the first slide, Sean, we'll just launch into it. I'll try not to burden you with a big preamble here.
All right, 1 second. I'm just going to share. I'm going to share it as a PDF because I'm having a little trouble with PowerPoint going on here. There we go. All right. Can you see that okay, George?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, for anybody who's forgotten, tonight we're talking about the Water Pollution Control Department, Public Works and Engineering, and Public Properties. And we can advance the slide from there. So just a real quick overview. Many of the counselors certainly have a lot of experience with Public Works and what we do. And I know Mr. Malone certainly does as the new member. But for those of you watching on TV, Public Works takes care of the town infrastructure. So the list I've put on here just is representative of some of the things we do, certainly not all, but there's 120 miles of sewer in town that exist. We maintain about 180 town vehicles, give or take a few every year. We've got about 153 miles of town road. That's center lane miles, so 306 lane miles, if you will, if you had to drive it all. 21 buildings of about 200,000 square feet is part of our public properties budget. 1,500 acres of open space, 5 parks / sports facilities, which many of them are. 115 miles of sidewalks, 7 2/3 miles of linear trail, and we have about 43 employees that take care of all the town's needs with infrastructure. So this is a quick overview of the budget. I won't burden you by reading all the numbers, but Public Works is generally flat. It's going down by about 0.5%. Public Properties is going up by almost 7%, the recommended budget for that. And I can explain some of that, which is largely utility costs and things. And then Water Pollution Control is recommended to go up by about 1.89%. So we'll dive into that as we go forward. We can launch into Water Pollution Control, which is what everybody wanted to do initially. So our budget, recommended budget, is going up by about 1.89%. It brings us up to about $4,228,000. And I'll just take a quick run through this, and I'll try to just hit the highlights, but these are some of the areas where we've had some major changes. So try to tee this up, and then we'll get in a little more detail as we go forward, especially about the notice of violation that I'm sure everybody wants to hear about. So on the personnel side, it's about a 27% increase, which is largely due to the addition of a new operator position, and also the additional cost for the town engineer fit into this area. The next one down, permanent part-time, there was a elimination of a clerk typist position at the plant, so that's been eliminated in this budget. The next one down, gas and diesel. We've obviously had a lot of price increases with gas and diesel going up. Everybody goes to the gas station and sees the price at the pump. The good news is the town engages in some consortium bidding that eliminates some of the spikes a little bit, but it certainly doesn't take away all the pain of that. But our gas costs for next year are going to be about $2.90 as opposed to what you see at the pump. So we're having some success, but it's still about $1 more than we paid the year before. Utilities, again, price increases going up almost 15%. Just those costs continue to go up as the market for natural gas and electricity and everything else goes a little crazy with the current climate. Consultants, is about a 19% increase, and largely due to the cost for the notice of violation and just WPCA support required with all the building in town and all the great things that are going on with granulous growth. Unfortunately, have some costs to us in terms of the consulting engineer and that sort of thing. Auto and equipment maintenance, again, this is, it's less auto, more equipment, but just some deferred maintenance that we're catching up on that we'll talk about. And then there's a line called other, which is a big number and encapsulates about $200,000. What it doesn't show you in that number is that this year we're estimated to be much higher than that $200,000. So that's again to take care of some of the solids removal and things for the NOV. And the last piece at the bottom, the totals, I tried to capture that a little bit. So this year's appropriation that we're in right now is about $4,150,000. We're anticipating to spend about $4,479,000. So that's an increase of about 8% just to take care of some of these NOV costs and that sort of thing. And that's just trying to capture that amount that you don't necessarily see in the year-to-year budgets. So leading into that, the next slide is kind of going to go into, well, I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions before we get into some of the NOVs things and that sort of thing.
Just if I could, just to be clear, it's the NOV that we're dealing with, but it's also not just immediately that. It's other things like right now, you're trying to order the 2 pumps. We really need one of them to comply, but the second one is for operationally to make sure that we're running smooth and have the redundancy that we need. And so we're actually doing it right. We're not doing the Band-Aid just to cover the NOV, correct?
That is correct. Yep. The
Yes.
council's been very clear on that that you want this done right. And you want things restored, to full operation down there, which is the smart way to go for sure.
I think one of the things we need to bring forward is kind of just step back a little bit and understand that the plant runs with a permit under which a permit that allows us to discharge into the river after we treat the water. We've just submitted our next permit for the next few years. Sean just signed it and sent it off. Our engineer finished it for us. So when we talk about these violations are exceedances according to what our permit actually allows us to do. There are a variety of different reasons why there were exceedances. Some of them kind of flew under the radar. They weren't monitored. They weren't closely understood. There's a lot that goes on in the plant, and if you were to actually look at the data that's collected, it's there's a lot of cells on a spreadsheet, and each one of them has an impact. And so what you're seeing is a lot of catch up of a plant that was not running very optimally. And our town engineer, our consultant engineer has been at the plant working with the staff there, and I think also the WPCA has a unusual cross section of a lot of engineering capability on it also as we speak. So it's not normal for the likes of a WPCA to get involved in the operations of the plant, but for the past few months we've been supporting that because of our capability, and we don't necessarily want to continue it, but we just have been able to use our expertise to help in that area. So what you're seeing is a lot of effort of a variety of different individuals. Things are going better. It's going in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work, and I think the budget's also going to show where we want to increase and augment capabilities of the staff and the individuals so that we can have a Dave, you talked about two pumps, so that we have some type of a backup system also, so to prevent this from occurring again.
Yeah, and I think we're very lucky and very fortunate that you commission members do have the experience level that probably many other communities aren't fortunate to have. So now that you're aware that there might be some issues to look at a little differently than you were, I think we're lucky and fortunate to have you. So thank you, and Jason and others that are working with that. Towards that end, I would just make one other comment that I do note that even with the over expenditure this year, in order to do that, you have a couple $100,000. You've got such a healthy contingency budget, fund balance, if you will, that you've been able to do that. And that was through proper prudent management in the past, that you've had the ability to handle a bit of a situation that needs to be addressed. And fortunately, there was no health or safety issues involved in it. It's just a matter of compliance to certain levels, and you guys are addressing it right away. So that's greatly appreciated. And you're looking at a minimal adjustment to the rate for the users and still be able to maintain what needs to be maintained in what your budget request is. So that's also a very positive thing. All right, are there others with questions or comments? Because George paused for a minute. If we did have any, I'm flipping through. Mr. Malone, I see you. No. Thank you.
Stop the
Hi.
share.
Mr. Bowery,
Yes.
David,
Oh,
I
sorry.
would really like
Oh.
to echo your comment regarding the critical nature of the quality of the folks on the WPCA. And really, when you can lean on some experience that goes well beyond the experience on the council vis-a-vis engineering and services like that, that's much appreciated, particularly as volunteers. And by the same token, we also know going forward, these guys will likely be on it in a different way than they may have considered in the past. But ultimately, for the future, we can't count on the talent that happens to be on the WPCA, even though we, will absolutely be looking for that kind of talent. It actually calls for it in the description of members of the board. But that's something I just want to emphasize here is so critical, George Watney, going forward, Sean Kimball going forward, that we absolutely have the right director of this facility that cannot be oversold or overstated. And I just want to know that I know I have the support of the entire council on that statement. So enough of that. I just wanted to use this as a plug for that. Thank you.
We'll take John Malone.
Yes, Mr. Malone, you had a.
Yeah, just quickly, and I echo what Tim said. Thanks for that oversight. It is very helpful. And by the way, as a first time council member, as I watched each of our commissions and divisions, I've seen so much of that really valuable volunteer work, which has been incredible. And it's been really exciting for me to see that as a new member. Just quickly, George, when the last slide, you went through the personnel changes, and I thought I saw the town engineer there. I wasn't sure if the town engineer comes through the public works budget or it's applied to the WPCD budget. But I thought we were getting a new superintendent. Is that in the budget? Because I just want to be clear on the personnel increases for the water pollution control department. That's all.
Sure. So the town engineer is budgeted 50% from the WPCD and 50% from administration and public works. So it's half and half, if you will.
Half and half. Okay, that explains it. I didn't understand. Okay. That was just a clarification. Thank you very much.
And John, to answer your other question, there is a fully budgeted superintendent and assistant superintendent as the actual budget lines.
Okay.
We also are required to have different levels of operators, class 4, class 3, and we were missing the class 3, and not sure what I can say, Sean, or not about it.
No, you can certainly, we have made an appointment there for the assistant superintendent. Acting assistant superintendent starts on Monday, April 4th, I believe. Or actually, let's say right on the next slide.
Sure. So if there's no further questions, subject to Mr. Barwey's concurrence, we'll move on to we can move on to the notice of violation. And we'll give you some background here, and then I can ask any of the folks on here from the WPCD side to say what they will. So we received a notice of violation on December 23rd. It was for concentration of suspended solids, BOD, and phosphorus in excess of permitted limits through the DEP. In an investigation, we found 8 to 9 feet of solids in some of the settling tanks versus about 18 inches to 2 feet as the standard when everything is running properly. So that was very unfortunate and not a great thing to learn from DEP, obviously. So we immediately set out on to remedy this, and in conjunction with the WPCA, they've been excellent partners in this, as has Dennis Divert as a consultant to us, and John Cronin and the whole staff down there have been very attentive to this. And the remedy has been to cease or reduce co-settling waste and primary sludge by activating the rotary drum thickeners. So the idea is to get these pumps that the council had just approved and get these rotary drum thickeners activated and pull the solids out of the system before it settles in large quantities. We want to continue to press the sludge to remove the water, the volume, if you will, in the tanks. That'll add room to treat more liquid, if you will. Continue removing the grit so that it doesn't settle with everything else, stuff that's not going to dissolve. And then we're going to try to drain and clean and inspect these clarifiers as we get lower flows, as they allow us to do it. There's a kind of a longer term solution out there, which is to address inflow and infiltration as the weather allows, and that's actually some capital money that already exists to kind of try to understand if there's I want to say leaks in the system. I guess the ability for water to infiltrate the system, whether that's through sump pumps or just a manhole that's got a break in it that will allow high water to go into it, or manhole cover that's missing, something that's simple in a, kind of in some of the overland infiltrator runs and that kind of thing. So that's kind of a longer term strategy. And lastly, as Sean just mentioned, we hired an acting assistant superintendent who's going to start on Monday, and he comes well recommended. And I think he and John will be a formidable team at the plant to kind of move forward from this violation to normal operations again. So with that, we can get as deep as you like into this, and I hope Dennis is on the call, because Dennis and Wright Pierce was kind enough to put together these some spreadsheets for us to kind of explain what the highest priority things are, and then kind of take it down from high priority to kind of routine maintenance, if you will. So we can go through this in as much detail as the council likes, but
George, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
And it goes to basically a conversation I had with Sean, and it had to do with a list, Sean, that was submitted that it had capital items included with budget items. Has all that been sort of sorted out so we know all of the inputs going into the operating budget associated with this project, and now disassociated with any capital projects? Has that been accounted for?
It has we have one of these slides is more capital related than operating. So this slide is generally operating, and the last slide is the one in the middle is more capital intensive. But these are I don't want to say preliminary, but they're still being worked out, some of the numbers.
But they're more or less reflected in what you need going forward for the remediation project.
Correct. Yes.
And that being funded out of operational surplus or reserves, just matter whether it increases or reduces it is yet to be seen, or we're pretty close to the number.
We're getting closer. We've just got to, as I said, that kind of $330,000 overage that we're projecting this year. That encapsulates a lot of this money.
I just don't want it understated and over surprising anybody, even though the money has to be spent. That's all I'm pointing towards. Okay, thank you.
A lot, just to help identify, a lot of this list is developed because after the NOV and the status of the plant operations, we thought it was best for our engineering firm, Dennis from Wright Pierce, to go through the facility from one side to the other and establish, basically the condition of our assets, how they're running, where we have gaps, and where we feel we need to make improvements in order to maintain regulatory compliance.
And John, to your comment, we should understand that everything in the plant wasn't replaced or fixed or upgraded during the plant correction. So some of this is sort of ongoing capital stuff that would have to be done maybe in the future. Is that correct? Or close
Yes,
to
there
correct?
is. I also think that, what we need to also face is that there was a variety of deferred maintenance that had, that occurred. And, when you look at deferred maintenance, if you're running something to failure, it costs on average about 10 times more to repair that than if you actually had the preventive maintenance that was actually performed. So even though we may be looking at, we have a healthy budget, I think some of that we're going to need to look at increasing the skill set, making sure that we're continually taking care of this asset as, one of the largest assets that the town owns and operates. So, George and Sean have, recognized this. They're supporting of it. And a lot of these things here, I can't say with any type of a confirmation that it's normal wear and tear. Some of it is probably accelerated. Some of it maybe not. It's hard to tell exactly, but we're looking at increasing the skill set of the employees so that they can proactively, take care of this asset at a higher level.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Okay. Were there other questions or comments? I'm trying to flip through just to see if anybody, just speak up if I don't see you. Thank you. Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to that last slide, I noticed for the two pumps, you have a budget of 60,000, and we just passed a resolution no more than 50,000. Is that something different or?
No, Dennis, you want to, comment on the other equipment and the improvements that,
Sure.
go under that also?
Sure. Dennis Diver, Junior, Wright-Pierce Engineers. Yes. So the 60,000 it's the $50,000 for the pumps, and then with that, the control panels that operate the system are the processors in there. The computer in those panels is burnt out and needs to be replaced. So that's a $9,000 expenditure. But a waiver is not required for that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just want to I took a tour of the plant and I was very impressed with how it operates and how things move around there. But I was a little discouraged to find out the issues that we're dealing with. But I'm glad to see that, especially the WPCA has really taken a hands-on approach to this and are working hard to fix the issues at hand and to create some kind of plan so this doesn't happen in the future. And I don't know if this is the right time, but maybe George can answer this, or John or somebody. The two pumps that use for the rotating drums, which haven't worked since they were put in place, will start working once we put these pumps in. Will that improve, I guess, the speed of removing the sludge? Or since we haven't used them in 5 years, how much better will it, when we have these two working properly, will this help, number one, with the NOV, and number two, going forward, removing the sludge in a more, I guess, a faster way so that we can stay within the deep's requirements?
Yeah, George, I could take that if you.
Yeah,
Sure.
Dennis.
So yes. So on a previous slide, George had mentioned that the goal is to stop co-settling or mixing the two sludges together. There's two separate sludges that are produced at the plant. One is primary sludge, which is at the beginning of the process, and the other is secondary sludge, where waste sludge, which is generated at the end of the process. And the Cheshire facility, prior to the last upgrade, was blending those together, sending the secondary sludge all the way back to the beginning of the plant, and it was mixing with the primary sludge. So what's happening is that's why the levels are so high in the tanks, because there's just too much. And one of the DEEP's statements in the notice of violation was, you're not operating the plant the way it was designed and the way that your O&M manual states that it should be operated, which means using the rotary drum thickeners. So the rotary drum thickeners will pull the waste sludge out of the system, and then it will get disposed of. It will never go back to the head of the plant. So your 9 feet of sludge will, if you have, it would take much longer to be in that situation.
Okay, so that explains how we got to the 9 feet, because these pumps weren't working properly to begin with. But in terms of removing the sludge on a yearly basis, I'm assuming we have some kind of an average amount that costs us to remove the sludge versus how much it's going to cost us this year to remove the extra 9 feet of sludge. And I'm just wondering what the difference would be in those.
Yeah, I don't have those numbers. I know that the guys at the plant were working overtime the month of January and February to get rid of that extra sludge. So I don't know, George, if you have those costs realized at all, and if you have those numbers.
Yeah, I think the biggest component is disposal of the sludge. So which is a little bit of an unknown, because you have to dewater it, and it's a per ton price. So kind of what goes up there is weighed, and you get what you get. So it's a little bit of a variable. I don't want to say the bad news, good news, bad news is that Sean ran some numbers, and over the last couple of years, we've underspent the sludge disposal costs, as you can imagine, because much of it is in the plant now. But we're going to end up spending in 1 year probably what we should have spent over 3 years to get rid of the sludge. That's the kind of the back of the envelope sketch for you. It's obviously bad news to spend it in 1 year, but there's a certain amount of sludge that has to be disposed of that should have been disposed over 3 or 4 years, or whatever the case may be. And that's where we're at. It's going to be in line with those numbers from what we can see.
The way we reduce the cost on the
That's
sludge,
what I was wondering. Yeah.
The way we can reduce costs on the sludge is by having our equipment, especially the belt filter presses, work efficiently, because we need to remove as much water as possible, because that's what's going to weigh the most when we deliver it to Synagro to get incinerated.
Okay, because I just want to make sure everybody understands. I mean, this council, and I'm speaking for myself, but I'm assuming most of the council members will agree with me that we want to make sure that, you know, we give that plant everything it needs to run efficiently, because in the long run, when it's not run efficiently, we're going to end up with a mess like this. And you know, I'm hoping that, you know, we can alleviate these issues in the future. And I think with what is going on right now, I think it's eye-opening for all of us. And I think, you know, we're moving in the right direction to fix the issues and move.
Sure. Yeah, and certainly that the council has given us on the operating side everything we've asked for in the grand scheme of things. So it's certainly not been the council's doing that what's happened down there. It's you know, it's not a funding or necessarily a personnel issue. It's just it's some internal issues we've had, and we'll correct that and move forward.
Right, thank you, Mr. Slocum.
Yeah, I just had a question, and it goes to some of the explanation for why we need 2 pumps in the first place. And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems as though it wasn't an engineering design issue with those pumps. It was failure to actually utilize them correctly. Is that a correct interpretation, Dennis?
No, it is not. The pump.
Okay.
So I'll try to explain it as. So
they were undersized.
Yeah, they're undersized. So you're sending 60 gallons a minute to this RDT, and then you have a pump that can only take away 5 gallons a minute. So
it would back up. It wouldn't have worked properly. Yeah, they were undersized from a design perspective.
It's a design perspective. It's a design flaw. Okay, thank you for that.
Mhm.
But secondarily, are we fitting it with the correct pump size? Is there an uptick in the pump size?
yes.
Okay, so that's really that's at the heart of the improvement, is that we're right sizing it for the need.
Correct. It's going from 5 gallons a minute to 25 gallons a minute, and it's going
Okay.
from 5 horsepower to I believe, a 10 horsepower motor.
Okay, that's huge. I mean, that's a big.
Double. It's double.
That's
Double.
a big understanding that makes this a lot clearer for me. So we're not, okay, thank you for that.
All right, other questions or comments? All right, George, then, thank you.
Sure. So we can, I'll just take you through the next three slides, which were these three spreadsheets that Dennis and John were good enough to put together. And I'll try not to go into great detail unless the council wants to, because I know time is precious. But if there's any questions, please let us know. But this, everybody can see the bottom line. It's about $148,000 of operating budget issues that are going on, and many of which are either being addressed currently or will be addressed in the near future. And number three, obviously, is the pumps that the council just voted to appropriate. So these are mostly, I'm going to say, deferred maintenance. Some of them are just cost of operation, like number four. That unit is supposed to be rebuilt every 5 years or so. So the plant, we all think the plant is brand new, and it's a very modern plant and early on in its life cycle, but it's 7 years old at this point. So it's not, it's unfortunately, we didn't just cut the ribbon on it yesterday, but we'll get on top of the deferred maintenance issues for sure and move that forward. So the next slide is, as I said, is more capital, and we'll obviously bring this up in the next few months as the capital budget is discussed. But we can, years 2, 3, we can kind of budget out, move these around to different years to kind of smooth it out. But the bad news is that it's a little over $1 million worth of items in there, and it's as one of the council members said, not everything was upgraded at the plant in that $32 million upgrade. Many things were, but there's some of these that were not done during that upgrade, and others are just systems that have to be upgraded as part of kind of modernization of controls and things like that, if you will. And the next slide is again kind of going back to operating budget, things you might see in future operating budgets. And it's about $635,000 worth of items, of various items, again, that are include the number 13 is a sludge truck, which is a capital budget for us, but many of the other things are smaller items, if you will, that might be in an operating budget or something like that. And we'll certainly work with the town manager and the council to see what the possibilities are for funding these as we go forward. So with that, I'll just say we've been concentrating on the plant, and we obviously had some embarrassing issues at the plant recently, which we'll turn around. But there are 9 pump stations out across Cheshire, and with a 10th one coming at Dickerman Road very soon, I'm sure, which will be brand new. So that we'll get a lot of good years out of that, I'm sure. But there's 9 pump stations that have been upgraded as part of the capital plan through many of the years, and a couple of them are on the current capital plan. But they all need routine maintenance, and one of as the council, the WPCA certainly, and a number of council members have said, we want to get a handle on the whole collection system, if you will. So Dennis's team and working with John Cronin and others are going to kind of go out into these pump stations and do a similar analysis eventually of things we can do to take care of routine maintenance in these pump stations, kind of have checklists and things to not run things to failure, as Mr. Parati said, and incur great costs. So the idea is to kind of the heart, if you will, is the plant, and the circulation system, the veins and the arteries are these pump stations, and we'll try to get out there and make sure the circulation system is running well once we get the heart under control. So that's going to conclude the WPCD portion of the budget. So again, I'll stop and answer any questions or turn it over to the experts.
Council questions or any other input? Mr. Jinks?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so George, just real quick. So you mentioned that we had some deferred maintenance we had to catch up on, then you showed us those two slides of a lot of projects that had to be done. Are those the deferred maintenance projects we have to catch up on, or are those in addition to those deferred maintenance projects?
I'll let Dennis chime in because he put it together, but largely that first slide is the main priority, if you will. And then it kind of cascades down from there, but I'll let Dennis explain it better than I.
Yeah, I think the first slide, the level 1 priorities, and encompasses the deferred maintenance that hasn't already, some items have already been addressed that you don't see on here. John had one of the first phosphorus filters rebuilt a couple of weeks ago, so that's been done and that's taken care of. There was some mixers at the plant that the blades had fallen off and they were at the bottom of the tank. John and his staff took the tanks down, got the blades out, and had a local fabricator make new blades. So there's been things going on, deferred maintenance items that are not on here. But these level 1 priorities, I'll just go through them quickly. The first one, you have a grinder in the digester building that currently is inoperable, and that's because it wasn't maintained. But right now the plant is bypassing around the grinder, and that has other implications, causes wear and tear on downstream equipment. So that grinder is important. The second item, there was the motor control center that feeds power to one of the heated sludge pumps. I don't know the details of it, but there was a flood in the building and sludge got into the electrical equipment and fried it. So that has to be replaced. The next item we talked about already. The fourth item is obviously deferred maintenance because the unit wasn't rebuilt after the 5-year mark, and it doesn't run. It's not operable. So currently the plant only has 2 operating phosphorus disc filters.
We have 3. We need 2 to run to really maintain regulatory compliance.
Correct.
So we don't have a backup right now.
Correct. And then the last one, purchase 2 metering pumps. There was 4 there originally, and they're down to 2, and they're pulling parts off of one to put on the other one. And so if either one of those pumps goes down, the ferric and alum are a key chemical that's used in the phosphorus removal process. So yes, I would say this slide is all due to deferred maintenance except for item 3 and 2 possibly. So you want to go to the next slide?
Well, just to summarize it, but those are all either in process or you're budgeting to do them almost imminently, within a few months. So that's,
yes.
Just make sure I understood it that way. Don?
I just had a quick, because on the phosphorus filters, we have 3. If I recall, Tori, I know that one is not operable. One is, I think, at 7 years. When it's supposed to be redone at 5 years. So is that one going to be in the works as well? Because it's past.
It is. However, we can't. They have to start. Well, I think John Cronin had tried to get them both done this year, but it was like $40,000 or $50,000 to do them both. I do not know the details of what happened or why only one was done, but I can tell you that we cannot take the other one down during the phosphorus removal season, because then you'll be only down to 1. So we have to wait until
starts
November.
Tomorrow, I think, right? Does it start tomorrow?
Yes. So we have to wait till November to do the second one.
So it goes April through October, correct?
Correct. But ideally, we should do them both in November. But I tried to spread things out a bit, but it's certainly a work in progress.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because, like what you were saying, keep up with the maintenance, and if we're already 2 years behind on one's not working, we need to get the other one fixed too, because then the third one, when is that due for replacement?
Well, currently 2 of the 3 are due now.
Okay.
All 3 of them were due, so
Okay.
they were able to get one done before the season started, And the plan should be to do the other two this coming winter.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is this a relatively typical kind of schedule of deferred maintenance costs? I mean, is this what we should expect going forward?
Yeah, I
kind of-
believe the manual, the maintenance manual from Kruger, the vendor, says to have them rebuilt or at least have them inspected by one of their technicians every 5 years.
It feels like for a plant that was just started 7 years ago, it just seems like an awful lot of new parts and projects and.
I can comment on that. So imagine
Okay.
you bought a new car. You bought a new car today.
Right.
You drove it. And when I say drive it, you did not turn it off. You drove it for 3 years straight. You didn't change the oil. You didn't change the tires. You didn't change the brakes. You couldn't because you had to run. So you can probably imagine,
Right.
what could have happened.
Yeah, I
Right.
think, I mean, another thing is, they don't make things like they used to anymore. Nothing lasts, unfortunately.
Well, and the other thing I would say is it was a $35 million plant, and we're talking about items that total 1%. $350,000, $400,000 on a $35 million plant. It's not even one, it's just 1%. So we're talking about not big dollars in the scheme of keeping this in the order of magnitude and keeping it in perspective.
Yeah,
And
that's
that-
a good point, David.
And that plant, that was just an upgrade project. To replace that plant would be, in the hundreds of millions of dollars, certainly, to start from scratch.
Right. Okay. Thank you, guys.
All right, Mr. Slocum, I see you.
Yeah, I had a question for Sean. Out of the necessity of addressing what we are now, what have you been able to use out of the current operating budget, which obviously is retired on June 30th? Anything?
What have we been able to use?
Yeah. What
yeah.
funds? There've been available funds. I'm
Oh yeah,
presuming.
spending the current. Oh yeah. So even the items you saw on that yellow sheet are largely being expended. Remember, obviously, it's a special revenue fund, so
Right.
they've been given the green light to take whatever expenditures they need to take out of the current operating budget and replace and repair or whatever is needed. So when you go into the budget, you'll see. And I think we had an initial estimate of fiscal 22 expenditure. You'll see, that's that $350,000 or so overage that you'll see in the current year operating budget. So none of this, I know we're usually in these meetings talking about next year's budget. A lot of this is talking about this year's estimated expenditures and then future years. That's why the other slide said years 2, 3, 4, or whatever. You're also going to see, ongoing additional costs, but some of those, again, we've had budgeted to the point that George made before. We've had budgeted in every year for prior years. If the money wasn't spent, it returned, and that's what grew the fund balance that David referenced earlier.
Okay. So
So-
that's basically the underutilization of appropriate funds that ended up in a reserve. And that's basically being spent a little bit after the fact.
Right.
Okay.
Which is why the sewer rate fee or any of isn't being proposed to increase, 20% to cover any of it. We have identified through the estimates available funds in the current year budget, in the regular budget line that would already be planned in a normal year for next year, regardless of whether this happened. And then in addition to that, there are capital budget items that we're going to, some are catch up and then some are just due to be replaced, as we said. So it's really kind of all of the above. But absolutely, the current year budget is being used. And again, because we're, want to address this and get it back online as quick as possible where it needs to be. There's no resistance to spending current year dollars on this.
Yeah. Well, I gathered that. I just didn't know that defining of it is very useful and helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any other water pollution control items related? All right. It looks like he froze, so he may.
I did freeze. I think you still hear me, but my
But
screen
yes,
froze.
I can hear you. Good. All right. I was going to say you guys are all set unless you want to sit in and listen to the rest of the public.
I'm good.
I just, I'm sorry.
It's
Yes,
a good
Dennis.
story.
No, I thought, based on some of the questions I'm hearing, I think it would be appropriate to spend a couple of minutes explaining the second slide, which is the
Okay,
the
sure.
capital
Sorry, yes.
projects.
Okay.
No, because that's sort of a crystal ball.
Mhm.
So just if I don't know, Sean, who's got control if they want to pull up the,
Sean's pulling it up.
okay, there we go. So these are items that we identified. So if you were going to if you were going to say, okay, we're going to do a project, we're going to hire an engineer, we're going to evaluate the plant, these items in the plant, and then we're going to do an upgrade, which is going to require plans and specifications and hire a contractor. So that's sort of the basis on some of these larger capital items. So studies and evaluations are required to figure out exactly what needs to be done. So these items, 6, 9, 10, 6, 9, and 10 are items that require a detailed evaluation, study, and a design to get to the end goal. I just want to make that clear. These are not plug and play numbers. These would require you to go out to bid and hire a contractor and go through that whole process again, that you've done several times in the last 20 years. But I just wanted to make that clear to everyone. These are not buy a pump and have the guys in the plant put it in. These are, a little more complicated than that. So that's hence the larger numbers.
Well, the whole process is, there's at most one per town on average. So there aren't that many around the country. So it really is a specialized
Yes.
by nature. So.
Yes, correct. Yep. I just wanted to just try to explain the capital projects
Yeah.
a little bit.
To your
Thank you.
point, Dennis, none of those costs include, a designer. That's a cost that has to also be, once we're adopting a capital plan, we have to get that built into all of this. So
Yeah,
that's got to be coming in the capital budget process.
Yes, correct. Those are just,
Okay.
yeah. Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
so that's the back of the envelope, and then we got to add our 15 or 20%, whatever it is for design and
Correct.
build.
Yes.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else that we should know, or anybody have questions regarding this? All right. Dennis, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And
Thank you.
all right. And Jason, thank you. And Mr. Parati, I think, is trying to come back on. We thank him again. All right. George, let's move on with the rest of Public Works then.
Sure thing. So the Public Works in itself starts around page 115, 116, and then it gets into the detail from there. So again, I know time is precious, and I'll try to summarize as much as I can, but as you can recall from my opening, Public Works is relatively flat. It's about a 0.5% decrease. So if I don't know if Mr. Kimball wants to move to the next slide, we can. This is a breakdown. This is the meat and potatoes part of Public Works. We've got everything from engineering, highway, sidewalks and drainage, snow and ice, trees, solid waste, and grounds. So that's the prototypical Public Works department that everybody thinks about. I'll try to take you through each one very quickly. I can pick off some lines if you like that are increasing or decreasing markedly, and then but I'm certainly open for questions. And I don't know, Mr. Kimball, if you want to take that down, I can just speak into the camera, and then everybody can see everybody and see if anybody has any questions. Administration's the first part. That's on page 117. And just the general point there is that the full-time town engineer increased that part of the budget to go up about 25%. So that's just the cost. The entire position got moved into administration and moved the cost up. The next section is engineering, which is on page 119. And the elimination of the assistant town engineer that had been programmed last year took that line item down by about 50%. So it just a movement of positions and where they fall in the budget. I will take a minute to, in my budget that I submitted to Mr. Kimball, I had the assistant town engineer remain in the budget, and certainly I understand priorities and everything, and it didn't make the recommended list. But I'll put in a word at this point. We do have, the good news is we do have a town engineer who we're hoping will accept the town's generous offer that's been made recently. And if that's the case, we do need to build a staff for that person to be effective. So traditionally, Cheshire has had kind of a 3-person engineering team. There's been a town engineer, an assistant town engineer, and an engineering technician. If we can get a town engineer on board, we'll have 2 of the 3, and we can certainly work with that. But to get the best service for the residents and the best shots at a lot of this grant money and things that's going to be coming down the line over the next few years, it really works well to have a 3-person team. So one person can kind of do the, I'm going to say the mundane isn't the right word, but the day-to-day tasks of engineering that have to be done, plan reviews and street excavation permits and doing various inspections. And another person can be kind of doing the higher level projects and looking out for grants and opportunities to fund them. So again, I won't burden you with a lot of detail, but I'll just plug for an assistant town engineer to be added at some point when the council sees fit to do so. Moving right along to the highway, sidewalks, and drainage, which begins on page 121. There's been some of the largest components there are gas and diesel, which again has been going up everywhere. It's about a 44% increase in that line because we obviously use a lot of it with the big orange trucks and all the specialized equipment that the council's been good to give us over the years, whether it's the Vector or doing leaf collection or the street sweeper and everything else. Unfortunately, we haven't electrified a lot yet in public works, and everything runs on gas or diesel, it seems like. One of the things that dropped was line 5401, which was consultants, and that dropped by about 14%. And that's a reflection of the town engineer coming online, just trying to, as we get a town engineer, we can start to reduce some of our reliance on consultants. It'll never be a zero-sum game, unfortunately. It'll never offset completely, and I don't foresee a time where we'll ever not need consultants, because engineering, as Dan Bombero in my office says, engineers, not everybody is fluent in every language of engineering. So you've got folks that are structural engineers or soils engineers or environmental or hydraulics or whatever the case may be. But I don't know of anybody who's fluent in all the different disciplines of civil engineering. So you're always going to have a need for some of those specialized services at times. And other than that, there were a few decreases in 5403 auto maintenance. We dropped about 5%, just trying to trim where we can. I just don't want everybody to think that it always goes up. We do try to trim where we can. And there's been a few areas there as you go through that line, you can see that have gone negative. And that's a good thing, and something we constantly try to do as we budget every year. I'll kind of take a breather there and see if anybody has any questions on those first 3 big chunks, and then we can move on if not.
Any questions now before we get too far in? Mr. Malone, and then Mr. Jenks.
Just quickly, I want to echo, from at least my perspective on the council, George's request for an assistant town engineer. I'm a little concerned with the level of development applications we're likely to be seeing over the next year or two, that we will still probably need more subconsultant support on that than less if we don't have the in-house personnel. So even from that perspective alone, I think it's just a prudent and probably a wise financial decision, even without the other support the assistant town engineer would provide. So I just want to echo that while we're here together. I know we'll talk about it further later on, but I do support George's suggestion that we try and keep that in the budget if we can.
That's not in the budget, correct?
It's my understanding it was been
No,
removed.
it's not. And I, just to echo also, and George and I talked about this a lot through the budget process, in part, the fact that we went out what's it, 4 times for the assistant town engineer position with no viable candidates applying. That was one of the concerns that we had. Not that that doesn't support, maybe it supports, unfortunately, having to pay more for the position than we were advertising it at in the approved salary ranges. But John, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think we're really, we're committed to trying to rebuild for a lot of reasons, the development coming, but also since I started here 4 years ago, we've never had a full-time town engineer. And it's not something I was used to coming from my prior community. It's something that I certainly support having first and foremost that full-time town engineer back. I'm glad that it's moving forward, and I'm really excited about that. And I want to tap into that person's knowledge and their own experience as well to sort of see and help build this department a little bit. But I absolutely foresee the need for an assistant town engineer sooner than later. And if the council saw fit to add that back, I would very much support that. And again, these are tough budget decisions as we're working through them. And as it stands, the budget that I presented on the general government side is still a 4% increase. And it's just really, you're dealing between competing priorities. So, but this is one that really stands out that I would certainly support bringing back.
Sean, if I may, could you just tell us, I'm not staring at that line number. What was that budget item that was not included for that position?
Well, prior year, so if you go to page if I flip back to 119,
okay,
you had the assistant town engineer position fully requested within the engineering line, the subline.
Yep.
10262 at about $81,000.
Yep. Plus all the other stuff. Okay. So that's not included. That's not included in the budget. And I really go to, I like the idea of a lead having a real say in that position. And I don't know if we can wait to do this next year, or if we would, I think we need to have a town engineer on hand first as part of that process. I mean, am I mistaken? I mean, is that a budgeting miss or what?
I guess I would just say for my part that certainly, we have that. And again, we're anticipating having that in the next year's budget, that we'll have the full-time town engineer. Certainly, I think if the council was amenable to us coming back with a proposal mid-year, we don't like to do that. Obviously, we like to plan for the full budget year in advance. But if we got to the point where we needed that additional position and wanted to come mid-year, I don't know that we have to wait an entire year if we made a supplemental budget appropriation for it. But otherwise, I agree with you that I think having the town engineer first and foremost on board to help inform how they want to build that division is very important. But certainly I foresee the same need that George identified.
So if we were to fund that at 50%, is that a safe way to go? Not just to, reduce a budget or increase by a little less, but do you think that is a prudent way to go? Or just fully fund it potentially, and you're unable to spend the money because you don't have someone apply or whatever, you don't get an applicant? I mean, what do you think makes the most sense for the council to really consider here?
Yeah, I think realistically, 50% is probably a good target in terms of having somebody settle in, again, hoping to start, I think anticipated to start, if all goes well, actually about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So well on board by July 1st, but available to really start to see kind of the workflow, the processes, the interplay with the other departments, and what kind of support they need in an assistant town engineer. That would really, I think recruiting in the fall and maybe having somebody start January 1st could make a lot of sense. And to your point, Mr. Slocum, that would be budgeting half of the position. I would very much support that. I don't think in the past we've also the other option, as we do with the full-time town engineer, but mostly because there is a lot more interaction with WPCA. We have, Cheshire has always had the town engineer funded 50-50 with those two divisions. I don't think we've done that with the assistant town engineer because I don't anticipate they'll be doing quite as much work with the WPC. So I don't think we go there necessarily, but just in terms of the array of options, that's another one. But the idea of funding it January 1 would make a lot of sense. And I know that would be a great support position to look forward to from the Public Works Department perspective.
So Mr. Chairman, that basically is a plus for consideration, I presume, so that when we're starting to add the pluses and the minuses, that's one that we want to have summarized as a potential plus in some form or another, correct? Mr. Bowery?
Sorry, I had it on mute. Sorry. All right. Ask your question again. I'm sorry. I was trying to.
Well, it seemed to me that it sounds like at least two of us have mentioned an approach to putting some of George's request or 100% of his request into the budget for its various reasons. So that goes into a plus column we need to talk about in summary items to talk about.
And now, do we want the whole thing or do we want half to give the person time to get on board, like Sean was talking about possibly, or well, what's your thoughts?
Well, I know the council probably could decide here. I was thinking half makes sense because we have a new town engineer on board, and he probably can he or she can sort of speak to what they recognize in the department, and I'm sure they're going to get a deep dive pretty quick and probably develop a fairly clear understanding.
Is that, John, would that also be what you would say is reasonable, since you also brought that up?
I actually think that makes a lot of sense. If George is comfortable with it, I think that makes a lot of sense. So.
All right, I see Sylvia has her hand up and Sandy did too, I think. So Sylvia.
You've said it all now, but I really think it's important because we are seeing all of these new projects coming in. It is critical that we staff them well. So I agree that we should have an assistant. I agree that I would absolutely support funding it with a start date of the 1st of January, which allows the new town engineer to figure out exactly what qualifications that person might need to have to supplement what we have on staff already, and to perhaps fill in some of the places that need filling in, some of those languages that you were talking about, that not everybody's versed in all the engineering languages. So I think that would be sensible to do. I would not be in favor of not considering it. Okay, I think we need to consider it. It would be lovely if we could consider the position completely, but I think it makes sense to start it as of January 1st. If we could do that.
Thank you. Ms. Pavano, did you have?
Yes, I did. 2 comments. I agree with what Sylvia just said. I'm sure we're going to discuss this more, but January certainly sounds like a good start time. But I wanted to ask about George about line 5409. I see that you're going to expend $831 and you're asking for $861. Can you explain the $30,000 difference?
Let's see. Is this in engineering or?
Public Works.
Other public work.
409 under other.
Yeah. Right.
Main Georges.
We're planning to expend 831,000, and we've got 828 in the appropriation. Was that your question, Ms. Pavano?
Yeah, and the proposed is for, I said that's 2023. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Never mind.
So that I can really quickly tell you, and I know we have many friends on the Regional Water Authority, but that is the service fee for the Regional Water Authority in there, and they went up 6% in January of this year.
Oh,
So
okay.
that kind of carries it.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's the small price the town is being asked to pay. To keep pure water running smooth and operationally efficient. Thank you.
Great. And for fire hydrants, which is very important.
Right. Well, the safety, exactly. That's right. With all the hydrants we have that are municipally owned by Cheshire, some towns are owned by the water company. So, all right. Other questions or comments? All right, George, did you have more you wanted to continue? Oh, Mr. Jinks?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David. I just wanted to say real quick, I mean, last year, I think I was a proponent for us kind of starting to build the engineering department with a town engineer. So in some ways, I feel like it's good that it's kind of gone this way and that we kind of come around to the idea of having a town engineer first that can then build out his or her own department. So last year we thought that trying to find an assistant town engineer and doing a lot of, consultant work was enough. So I'm wondering if, we have a new town engineer coming on now. It seems to me we still have a consultant. I know there's, some back and forth on whether or not it should be January 1st or half, or half the year, it seems to me we probably could get away with funding, half the year rather than the full year. It would seem to me, at least we could steal that or hold that savings at least until we kind of work our way through this a bit more.
Agree.
Right. Very good input. Thank you. And I think Sean has heard our concerns. And all right. So George, you want to move on now?
Sure. And I'll just say thank you for considering my request. It's I agree with everything the counselors have said. I think it's good to kind of get somebody on board first, and then let them see where their specialty lies and what other specialties they need in-house. That makes a lot of sense. But thank you. So moving right along, there's another 3 sections here of Public Works, snow and ice, which is everybody's favorite. And that has remained, we kind of, just so all the counselors, I know many of you understand this, but so the folks in TV land, we kind of use a plug number every year. It's based on an average winter, if you will. And we never have those, some winters are brutal and some winters are very mild, and it seems like we never get the average winter. So sometimes we're a little over, sometimes we're a little under. This winter, which was fairly mild in the grand scheme of things for total snow events and everything, we're still probably going to be over budget by $20,000 to $30,000. And the reason, which is probably it's just an interesting fact, is that it seemed like every significant event we had happened on weekends or holidays.
Right.
So it was
Beautiful.
it was like the worst year for labor rates to be used to do things. But we've got a great crew that takes a lot of pride in snow and ice, and I hope everybody was very happy to be able to get on the roads very soon after storms and safely. Anyway, going back to snow and ice, the only big change there is again gas and diesel with the fuel price increases. That went up by about 75% just because of the nature of how that impacts the budget and that sort of thing. So we'll soldier on with that and keep moving. The next one is solid waste, which encompasses many different things. I'm sorry, trees. The next one is actually trees, which is on page 125, which is a nothing amount of about $1,700. And we do most of our tree removals out of the capital budget, so I'll leave that for another day. On page 126 is solid waste, and that is mainly obviously the recycling and refuse collection in town. We use consultants almost exclusively for all of that, and there's some of the bigger lines there is that we for 5401, which is the consultant line, again, Mr. Kimball dropped off about $6,000, about 20%. And again, reflecting the town engineer kind of getting their hands into this issue and kind of knocking that down a little bit. And then 5409, which is the big number there, that number drops from about 2.37 million to about 2.16 million because bulky waste gets pulled out. It's a one-time charge that appears in the current budget, but not in the future budgets, or one-time fund center that appears there.
And
so
George,
that dropped it by.
If you don't mind, if I could just jump in on this one, because there's a lot, and I know the council's been very understanding. We've talked a lot about solid waste over the last few months, but just a couple items to note, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So as George said, fiscal 22 appropriation includes the additional $325,000 that the council appropriated post-budget for bulky waste funding with ARPA dollars. The estimated expenditure line, fiscal 22, that really, as we were calculating that number, that really needs to include the actual expenditures for bulky waste. I think, George, as we were going back through it, it's one of those things, and I think, Mr. Borey, you had pointed out, like, why are we so under expended? Frankly, that line, just as they were tallying up all the normal lines in the operating budget, just wasn't included because that bulky waste got added almost more as a capital expense. It's not an every year thing. But then the other piece that's important that I know Mr. Walsh is probably ready to ask about is this is the total expenditures with respect to the total contract for solid waste disposal. As I said in my transmittal, there's a $108,000 revenue offset. We budget all of the expenditures, but we are using that tip fee stabilization fund that the council was good enough to appropriate when we got the Wallingford funding for the 5-town consortium back. So in case there's any questions, that number is an all-in expenditure estimate, but the mill rate is supported by the $108,000 to smooth in the mill rate increase. So thank you for letting me just clarify those 2 points.
Yeah, good.
Sure.
Right, any questions on solid waste? Mr. Veliver.
Thank you very much. George, one of the topics that you and I talked about over the last few years has been the recycling program. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. The hazardous waste program that when I first got elected and I was on the chair of the solid waste committee, we talked about, we shifted to the regional, the COG program, and now we've gone back to the RWA program, which obviously is more expensive. Could you just give a little bit of just a little background on how that's been utilized over the last year or two with going back to the Regional Water Authority? Has that been a success? I know it's obviously, it looks like a $35,000 line item, and I just want to find out, have we found that to be a successful program, well used, well utilized, going through the Regional Water Authority?
Thanks for that opportunity, Mr. Veliver. Yeah, and that actually has been a well-used program. I have the figures behind me, but I won't dig them out right now, but I can get them to you. But certainly having the ability to bring your hazardous waste weekly, even though you have to go down to Long Wharf, it's been very well utilized. And as you can imagine, during the pandemic, folks seem to be clearing out garages and basements and everything else. And all the towns, I think, saw a market increase in folks using the program. But it's been well attended at Regional Water, and they've been a great partner to kind of coordinate all that for us. One of the benefits, as I said earlier, is that you can, from May through October, you can go down there and make your disposal. Whereas when we were going through the COG, which was a good program, but it was only 3 times a year. So you're very limited, and it didn't work with some people's schedules, which was unfortunate. We heard from them, so a number of them. And one of the other good things with regional Regional Water is that some towns have a satellite collection, they call it. So you might have a Meriden or different towns around us that have a collection, and Cheshire residents can go there just as well. So sometimes it's even closer if you look on the website. But
Okay.
Very well used, and I think very well appreciated by the residents I've heard from.
Good. Well, thank you. I just want to make sure that I know that we did switch back to that. I know it was a little bit more expensive, but that was my understanding. I just wanted to get a confirmation from you, and that it's a well-received program, and it's worth that a little additional extra expense in order to provide more usability and more utilization by the residents. So thank you.
Amplifying that for a bit, George, Sean, and I were on a call with some of the people from the Regional Water as an update, and they are also going to have electronics. They're going to expand some of it, not every week, not all May through October every week, but there is going to be some electronic, which may take a little pressure off of us. We did one early. They're going to be doing one in the spring, I think June or whatever was going to be the time frame. And so that could be a help. Although we all know, we on this call know, and hopefully the townspeople are getting aware that can also be brought to the north end of town at free for the first so many items.
7. Yeah.
AJ Waste. So.
Yes, there are plenty of opportunities for people to get rid of those things. We just have to make sure we keep making people aware of them.
Right, exactly. And that's what this was, good opportunity to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other solid waste questions? All right, then the last department for you, George, right? Grounds?
Sure. The last division, you have coming down the home stretch for this one.
Division, yeah.
So grounds is on page 127. And again, there's just a couple lines that gas and diesel 5409. Again, the increases there have pushed us up about 53% in use, and all the mowers and trimmers and trucks, unfortunately, all operate on that. And then 5204, which is program materials. We've historically been overspent in this line, and it's this is where we kind of do the nuts and bolts of grounds maintenance, so fertilizing and seeding and aerating and all the stuff we do to the fields to try to make them look good. Also paint and lining equipment and all that stuff. But we've picked up McNamara's maintenance, and we're happy to do it as part of that's been kind of a new wrinkle for us in the last year or so. So we just need to beef that line up a little bit, and it's about a 33% increase what we're requesting. But I can tell you it's needed and it's well done. I think the fields look very good. They appear, they have a good appearance, and I think they play very well for the part that we can do to kind of keep the turf on them and everything. So it's money well spent for the sports groups in town, and that's our request.
And you do a great job maintaining. We hear that from residents all the time. And I do know chemical prices are up significantly, more than the 8% we hear inflation is. So that's going to hurt with the fertilizer and other materials that are needed. Mr. Developer?
Yes, quick question, George, and maybe this is going to go to maybe John Golick is going to have some discussion on this as well. But over the past couple of months, we've talked about Park and Rec, and they're taking sort of a little bit more control of some of the open spaces and the areas in town. When it comes to maintaining those spaces, does that fall to your staff as far as if there's open spaces that have to be maintained and mowed and that type of thing? Does that fall to the Public Works?
Yeah, correct. So, any kind of trail maintenance or anything, if we try to canvass the trail system routinely and cut down trees that have crossed the trail or limbs or that sort of thing. And we do select mowing in places and that sort of thing. And we partner up with Mr. Golick and his crew at Recreation, who we have a good working relationship.
Right. I was talking, yes. Thanks. I'm talking some of these big open space areas, because we have a lot of open space around town and some of them have to be mowed. And I just wasn't sure whose department covers that, whether it falls under your staff or you're just in the relationship with John and how that works.
Yeah, that's us. We definitely, we would do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right. George, thank you so much.
Sure. I've got public properties too, if you'd like, which will only take a minute.
Yeah, where is that one?
That's on page 44.
Okay, I was looking at Park and Rec already.
We do a lot in Public Works.
Yes. Yeah, no, I know all the buildings. They go after you when they need something. Librarians say, fix these light bulbs, and they got to go to you.
That's right. So on page 44 is the public properties, and there's another slide. If Mr. Kimball can put that up, it kind of just gives us a rough overview of properties. I think it's slide number 13.
All right, I'm pulling it up. Hold on. Oops. See, it's the. There it is. All right. Start over again. All right. And there, you see it now.
So that's it. So this was one that was up almost 7%. And I'll just the slide you moved to is perfect. A lot of that is just unfortunately utility price increases. So we, as everybody knows, the cost of oil, natural gas, electricity, everything with it has gone through the roof lately, and we're seeing this in our projections going forward. So if things calm down a little bit or go back, we could certainly we'll be happy to refund this money to the town that's projected to be used, but That's in large part what those increases are. When you have double-digit commodity increases, it's hard to keep anything down. So with that, if there's any questions on public property, I'll be happy to field them.
Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, this, George, probably goes to beyond public property because I know we've all been talking about the cost of fuel. And I know when you guys were all putting together your budgets, we were nowhere near the price volatility that we're living with now. I mean, diesel or anything hadn't crept up like it has in the last month even. So I guess my query here has to do with we need to be safeguarded against, the worst case scenario or at least the case getting worse. And I wanted to be sure that you felt you're really building this into your budgets, because I know you didn't settle on what we're looking at now, even with consortium prices.
Sure. And thank you for the question. That's a good question. The good answer is that we go out about a year at a time for many of these commodities, so we're locked in. The bad part is that diesel falls within the half year, so there's kind of a half year of unknowns for us.
Right, because we were aware of this, George. That's why
right.
Because we were aware that we have a good half and a terrible half. But the question
Right.
is, have you built in for the terrible half yet?
We
Completely.
have, yeah. The good news for the town is we don't pay a lot of the use tax that
Right.
regular consumers have to. So my budget calculates diesel at $3.50 a gallon for the unknown part of the transition. We're at about $2.90 a gallon right now. So that's a 60% increase just to kind of build in a buffer. And I'm hoping when that comes off almost a year from now, 9 months from now, that maybe things will have calmed down a little bit.
Yeah, but consumers are paying double. And I know
Sure.
that means, so 60% isn't double.
Right.
I just, I'm not looking to increase budgets, but I just want to, obviously you're just going to have to, not have any more snowstorms on Sunday. There's going to be something that has to go, Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was it.
Sure. Other questions or comments? All right. George, thank you.
Sure. And if I've got one more slide just to wrap up, which will only
I'm
take
sorry.
about a half hour,
I've got to get rid of that hook that I keep trying to give you by mistake. I apologize. It's not on purpose.
I know John and Sheila are riveted by this public works presentation, so it's all good. So just as a wrap up, the current fiscal year, we've certainly had some challenges. There's been some personnel issues. There's been some regulatory issues. We've had some pretty significant rain and wind events this fiscal year so far. And those, I hope those moderate, all of them. But we had successful bulky waste and recycling events, electronics recycling, mattress recycling, that sort of thing. So that's been a huge boost for us. We're addressing the NOV priorities at the treatment plant. We're locked into that, and I give you my word that we're gonna make a lot of progress on that. And as kind of COVID has eased, the full use of the sports complexes and the parks is certainly going to come back in, and we're prepared to deal with that. For next fiscal year, we're a huge department. We got a lot of tentacles that go everywhere, but we're going to try to, our goal is to continue to improve the town's infrastructure, to obviously address the treatment plant issues and maintain that at a nice kind of predictable level going forward. We'll respond to emergencies and other events as we always do, and we'll try to accomplish all our routine tasks, which is street sweeping, paving, catch basin work, sidewalks, all the other things that go into it. And our goal is always to provide excellent service for the residents. That's the overriding goal of this department, and I think every department in this town. So we're very resident focused, and that's our goal. My pledge to the council and our pledge to the department moving forward is we'll try to always provide excellent service and do the right thing for our residents. And that will conclude my presentation.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you for that, George.
Yeah, John's all excited. All right. Thank you very much.
MVP.
Yeah.
Good luck, John.
Yeah. All right. So now we welcome John. I see Sheila and Elizabeth are also on. So Sean, do you want to do a preamble?
No, I think just, keeping in mind the time, we'll just dive right in. I'll turn it over to John. And I think we'll probably start, John, I'm assuming, with your recreation department budget and then maybe slide over into the pool after that.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Elizabeth is with us and so is Sheila. I did prepare some slides, but with the time being running late, we could pass on those and we can get right into the budget book to page 167 and go over and highlight the some of the lines that were significant that between Elizabeth and myself, hopefully we could explain and then answer any questions that you may have as we go through each one. So on the first one, in administration and personnel services, you are aware that we were looking to restore some of the staffing levels to add a part-time administrative assistant. When I first came to Cheshire in 2019, that was the staffing level, was where we had the equivalence of 5 full-time employees. There was 4 full-time and 2 part-time. We did have a retirement and we did a shift to focus on which I thought was a better use of a full-time position, the programming end, and we hired Tim Weed for that. It still leaves us, in my opinion, a little bit short. I did send Sean an explanation, and I think he did pass that along to the council, some of the discussion and the backup to support keeping that position. What we did was, as a staff, we went back into our budget. Sean gave us the opportunity to make up some of the difference by revisiting some of our lines. And as we go through the budget, I'll point those out. And it's also on that email that he did send to you. In the supplies services line, the 5204, we had a significant increase from 18,000 to 37,000. A lot of that driving was we talked about between George and Sean taking over some of the park equipment items and some maintenance items. For instance, bases, netting, court netting, tennis nets, basketball nets, volleyball nets, pickleball nets. There's been a couple of requests from CYB and the Reds over at McNamara. They're looking for some materials to roof the dugouts there. So that would be 8 dugouts, 4 fields, 2 at each field. They do have, I think it's I don't know if it's a pipe fitters or a steel workers union that would perform all the labor. They were just looking for the material cost. There's been a request for a tennis trainer similar to the one that's at the youth center courts to be put over at Cheshire Park. McNamara, the CYB, the Reds are also looking for a couple batting cages because of the ones that are currently at Cheshire Park. They don't get a lot of use. There's not too many people going there for batting practice and then hopping in their car and then going over to McNamara to take part in their activities or their games. So a lot of those things came up to about $43,000. And in talking with Sean, he budgeted it at $17,000.
What line are we on?
So we're at 5204
On page,
on the administration side, page 167.
thank you.
So part of trying to restore the funding for that part-time clerical person, we removed the 17,000. So we're back down to a 20,000, which we would use for just our normal park and rec operation, programming and material needs.
Yeah, and John, if I could just jump in here, I mean, this is an area where, again, I think, the council might want to give some consideration to, as we take up the capital budget, before, I guess about 3 years ago now, the council had the foresight to approve some large park upgrade capital items that had a lot of, had a significant impact on a lot of our parks and playgrounds and fields and backstops and dugouts. And I know we've programmed a lot of that funding. This might be an area where, as John said, it's not hard to come up with 50, if not even $100,000 worth of additional improvements, especially as these leagues are back out, fully active post-COVID, and even more so, right? Even some of the diamond sports, you're probably hearing that were trending down in popularity even 4 and 5 years ago. John, I mean, can certainly attest to the fact that kids and families are turning out in record numbers for a lot of these programs. And we're going to have a need, and we certainly have a need for some of the school fields, something I know the council has talked about before, as we try to enhance and partner with the public schools, some of those. So, as much as we're proposing maybe taking some of those one-time or kind of additions to this recreation budget that weren't there in years past, somewhere, if we could see fit to a capital appropriation for John to use and program across a lot of these assets, I think really might make a lot of sense too. So again, I know this year we're not taking them up at the same time, but that's a consideration that I just like to put out there as a possible solution.
Any questions so far? Moving right along. The next line on page 169. The other significant increase, and maybe I could turn it over to Elizabeth to explain some of this. This is the program, summer help, and there's a whole line of part-time seasonal workers that came out of this. And maybe Elizabeth, you could talk about the drivers of why this is expanded.
Sure. One of the biggest factors is just that minimum wage is going up. We're going up another $1 this year. So that's one big driver. Another position that we really need at this point, because there are so many increased needs with the campers, is we need a camp nurse full-time. We had one part-time prior to last year. We did not have a camp nurse last year, but it's really something that needs to come back into the budget. There's also the building supervisors at the schools and the youth center, which we didn't see as much use in the youth center this year. So that's going to be going up significantly. And over at Mixville, we had talked about adding a Mixville supervisor, especially on the weekends when we don't have full-time staff in the office, somebody on site when Mixville tends to get the heaviest use, having an additional person who has more seniority and can be out there as a go-to person for both the staff and any residents or guests who are at the park. So those are some of the positions that are in there. Another one that kind of goes hand in hand with our revenues is we have a shift in our tennis program this year. For the past 3 years prior, we had done a partnership and we had done a 50-50 split of the fees that came into the program, and we had 0 personnel expense. So it was just a 50-50 split. So it only hit our revenue. We weren't expending anything on tennis. We have shifted back to where we were prior to 2019, and we're going to have our own in-house tennis staff again this year. So there's an increase in the personnel expense to have those tennis people as part of our staff instead of a contracted thing. But there's also a correlating increase in the revenue that actually more than covers that. So that's another change. Yes.
Do you have that sheet that you could throw up that you could share?
Yes.
Just to maybe help clarify some of this a little bit.
Sure. Actually, see if I can share the right one. So can you guys see here? These are the numbers that we're projecting to be spending for, sorry, it's hard with the tiny screens here. So this is what we're projecting that our expenses are going to be in the year that we're currently living in right now. And there is a significant jump. So we're going from about 183,000 to 251 because our Mixville camp staff is going up significantly. We also had to turn people away last summer for camp because we had a set number of staff. So this year we're going to be accommodating more kids in town at camp. We had set the number to be conservative with COVID, and that was the number of qualified staff that were able to handle the number that we thought was right with COVID. But since we had a wait list, we think that we can expand that. And again, that's going to impact our revenue. If we wanted to bring the number of staff down, we could probably bring it down to staff, but that could hurt us. It would only save us about $7,000 in salary, but we could lose $20,000 in revenue. So that doesn't really seem like a good move to make. The TR staff is pretty static. There's not going to be a big change there. The camp nurse, you will see that there's going to be a little bit of expense this year. That's because our camp starts. We have 1 week that hits in June, and then the rest comes July. Our basketball staff increase is simply the increase in minimum wage. Our school building supervisors are going to be going up again, the minimum wage, youth center, building supervisors. We really didn't have too many rentals. This was mostly for our programs. We just started opening up rentals. They're going to be starting up next month. So we had, there's going to be a big difference there. The Mixville Rangers are going up in minimum wage, and then this additional position that we're going to absorb some of the costs this fiscal year because they'll start Memorial Day weekend. You'll see that we had to spend about $8,000 in office help this year. That was one of the reasons that we requested this part-time position, because we found that there were areas that were starting to suffer because we didn't have enough staff in the office. So when we saw that we weren't spending the money on our building supervisors, we thought to get into the right place so that we were adequately serving the public, having a part-time person. Like last summer when we had our rentals in full swing and we were preparing, we were selling Mixville passes all the time. We had a lot of people coming back into our office. So that was a time there. And then again, over this winter, as we were gearing up towards starting and turning on the rentals again, we had staff come in. Our TR program staff, this is just going to be an increase in programs that we're going to be able to offer. The tennis staff, again, that's because it's this calendar year that we're making the change. So there's going to be a little bit of expense this fiscal year and then next fiscal year. And the seasonal instructors, this actually, I'm sorry, these two numbers don't reflect the latest change that I talked about with John. These two, we thought that we could probably get away with only being about $20,000 in the seasonal instructors and the tennis staff. We were able to negotiate, and in the discussions with the new staff that we're bringing on, they felt that it was better to have a slightly larger class for tennis. So we're going to be able to serve the same number of people with fewer staff. So those were two areas where we had brought those numbers down. So this tennis staff number is actually going to be about half. It's only about $4,500. And the seasonal instructors, I think we had brought down to 20,000. So that's kind of a rundown of the part-time line. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk through them.
I actually do. You're showing about a $68,000 increase in the part-time staff, which is the programming staff, which are the people that run the programs. And that's because you're expecting more participation, and that's great.
Right.
In the revenue, you're only showing an estimated revenue this year of 241 and a $53,000 increase to 294 for next year.
Right. So one of the things is when we have our programs, maybe this is just a way that I look at it, but we are going to run the program. Let's say we have 7 kids in the program. We're going to run it. So our revenues, so that I don't disappoint you guys, are based on those 7 people. I think there's a good chance we could get 10 or 12 people in it, and it's going to be the same number of staff at that program. So I want to hit that goal of revenue, and I don't want to fall short of it. So we're going to run the program with the 7 people as just one example, but the same number of staff that we're hiring can have up to 12. So we could see more in the revenue there, if that makes sense.
It does. It just, I'm a little concerned because we're going up a little bit more in the expenditures than we are in the revenue projection. And the expenditures are going to happen because if the budget had happened, you're going to run the program unless you don't get the 7.
Right.
But, okay, just a comment or an observation.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, I noticed that you have the Mixville lifeguards are not in there. Is that somewhere else, or we're just not going to have them?
We did not budget for them. That was something that we had in consideration. If we wanted to have Mixville lifeguards, it's going to be another $20,000 that we did not budget for. We did talk to the town attorney around budget time, who said that our Mixville staff, even if they were not certified lifeguards, would be able to enforce rules as long as we post them clearly on the website and make sure people understand what the rules are as they're coming into the park. Instead of having
I'm not as concerned about rules as opposed as much as saving lives.
Another consideration is a lot of the issues that we have might, if there were to be a tragedy, unfortunately, it's probably going to happen when there's not even a guard on duty. In order to adequately cover the park, this was even the bare minimum, the $20,000. I think that was only about 4 or 5 hours a day. So that would be just the afternoon time. That's not going to cover the evenings. It's not going to cover the mornings. If you were to do that, I mean, we're talking about a staff closer to the pool. And I mean, it's not as many
I'm just
guards.
thinking even possibly just how about weekends when it may be more active. I don't know. I mean, if our town attorney is okay with that, that's fine. But I don't know.
So Don, if I could just add, we presented all the different scenarios, and we wanted to make sure that, I think that the main issue is that there are things that just happen and occur there, that if there was a supervisor or the presence of somebody in and around the beachfront area constantly, that we could maybe thwart a lot of some of the maybe swimming issues that would occur. And so we wanted to propose this option so that we could have better control of what was happening, so that we didn't have a kind of a redo of the last few years.
Are the rangers trained in basic first aid at all?
Yes, they have first aid and CPR training.
Okay.
Another consideration with the lifeguards, when you mentioned weekends only, we had a discussion because we think it could be confusing to people who are going there with their kids. If there are sometimes lifeguards and sometimes not lifeguards on days when they go, that becomes an extra challenge. And there's a serious lifeguard shortage right now. So we didn't want to budget for something that we couldn't provide. And there's just a real staffing problem there because they have a higher level of responsibility. And we just wouldn't want to say we're going to have lifeguards every weekend and not be able to provide that.
And also, I mean, I assume there's a camp nurse that will be probably at Mixville during the camps. So there will be a nurse somewhere there in case there's an emergency, I assume, at some days.
So our camp does have lifeguards. We have lifeguards for the camp specifically, but that's not for the general public. In the event of an emergency, it's probably going to be a 911 emergency. And even at our camps, depending on what the emergency is, it may be that emergency personnel are having to come onto site. The nurse is going to provide the day-to-day care for the kids. There are a lot of kids with medication or things that need to be checked throughout the day. So those are some of the things.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Since I speak up, Sylvia, I can see.
Yeah, just to follow
Yeah,
up.
could we get rid of that grid? Then you can
Oh,
see
sure.
it. And we could.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just to follow up a
There we
little
go.
bit on that, that would probably require signage posted, and perhaps it's there already that says something like there are no lifeguards on duties and you're swimming at your own risk. Now that probably doesn't absolve the town totally of liability, but it is a posted warning. So do we have those signs currently? And if not, we would have to budget just having those signs put there. That's
Those signs are posted. There have not been lifeguards in a few years out there.
okay. So they're there already.
Yes.
Right.
Can I just add something to the liability? As far as there is in the state of Connecticut, there is nothing stating you have to have a lifeguard on duty. As long as you have the signage there, the liability is taken off of the town.
Okay. So
Thanks, Jill.
I want people to be safe, obviously.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
it seems like with the supervision that you've got there and the level of use of the park for the majority of the days, perhaps this is reasonable to assume that we have enough coverage with supervisors that the park supervisor can keep an eye on what's going on at the beach.
And there are times where people are swimming outside the swim buoys, or they're doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. That's why that extra supervision, that extra presence could curtail some of that activity and get everybody back into the area that's demarcated for the swimming.
Right.
All right. Other questions or comments? Mr. Slocum, I thought I saw your hand. There you go.
Yeah, and Dave had his up. If you want to go, Dave, I'll defer to you.
Oh,
David
no,
Delliver.
good. You had your hand up before I did on last.
Oh,
round, so
okay.
that-
Well, here's my question, Elizabeth. With the camp, with that building that's being worked on at some level, I have no idea what level of doneness, completeness, is that factoring into your budgeting for staff for the camp, or is that not camp related?
Camp would definitely take advantage of that, but the project hasn't started yet because funds have not been fully approved yet, unless I'm misspeaking, John. So we did not figure that into it because it was
So
still a
it's
giant
not under
question mark for us.
well, I knew that there were some issues with what was available, but I still didn't know if there was what state it was in. So, okay. So it's not an issue as far as being occupied. So you've got adequate staff.
Sorry.
Yeah,
We have adequate staff.
I was just trying to, just to answer your question. Yeah, so this is one of the items we're actually going to talk about at our agenda prep meeting next week. But the bids so far that have come in have been over the available budget. So we are looking for council direction coming soon as to whether to move forward, modify the appropriation and whatnot. So we'll be talking about that on Monday morning. Taking that forward.
All right, David, Mr. Delliver.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Just from utilization of Mixville, over the past year or so, obviously with COVID and stuff, have you seen an increase are you expecting to see an increase in utilization of Mixville as a park and as a swimming location? Have you seen that over the last year? Are you looking to see an increase in that over the next year? I'm just trying to get a feel for how is Mixville utilized over the past year or so.
We shifted how we were staffing it. So we did like day passes. We've seen more day passes purchased on site compared to the seasonal passes, which also went up. We also made them easier to purchase. So hard to know which that is. So that's driving the money coming into Mixville. We've seen an ebb and flow over the years out at Mixville as far as use. And I don't know that it's necessarily that much more use. It's just being used harder by the people that are there. How's that? Okay. I don't know that it's more bodies going in. They're just using it more and louder than they have in the past.
The fishing derby's making a comeback. The muck run's making a comeback. We have Cheshire Mid-State Rugby using the upper open field because we don't have enough inventory of rectangular field. So they're using that. And also we're sharing some space in the storage container for some of their equipment. Since George's guys put down the new beach sand, we have that new beach comber that's going to be put into service. So hopefully the beach will be more presentable. The people enjoyed the volleyball, new beach sand there. So I think there'll probably be an uptick in volleyball use there. And I think our rentals are doing pretty well so far out of the gate.
They are doing well out of the gate. And we do have our own volleyball program as well. So it's definitely being used. I was thinking more specifically just the summer tied into the passes. So you speak to all the rest of it, John. I'm sorry, I overlooked rugby.
Sure.
No, but I was curious on just how that was playing out, because Don had mentioned the issue of lifeguarding and this was discussion of that, and whether we see an increase of people utilizing it as not only the things that John just mentioned, but as a water facility. So I was just curious how that's been played out, and whether you think that perhaps your revenue estimates are perhaps like conservative, and that you may actually see a higher utilization with more day passes and other things going into it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halber. Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, I just had one last thing since you brought up the comber for the beach, the goose dropping issue. I know we approved a new piece of equipment last year, and how is that working well? And I know we used to have a dog chasing the geese for a while, but we found a new piece of equipment that is supposed to be cleaning that up better.
So I can jump in here, although I'm glad George has stayed on the line. So the short version, and George, correct me if I have any of this wrong, but the beachcomber arrived sort of at the tail end of the season. So the company that sold it to us was good enough to do some sort of combings with their own equipment before it arrived. So that's how we maintained it. I think it arrived closer to November. So we haven't had a full season of using our own equipment. So that is being planned for and starting now. But I do think George could certainly jump in on, unfortunately, the dog goose mitigation expert has retired from the business, and we are looking at alternative solutions. I think the comber is part of it, but getting less geese there is a very critical part too. So you're probably going to see some new creative solutions, whether it might be some of the wolf cutouts or whatever, or other things that have worked from time to time. But George, feel free to jump in. If I don't think there's anyone else lined up for the dog solution that the town has used with some levels of success over the last few years.
Correct. And Sean covered it really well. But yeah, we're looking at some different options. There's lights that can be kind of actuated to scare them off, and dogs and things. And Sean shot down my idea of like the rabid dog area, but I have hopes in the future. But we can. We'll certainly address it. The good news with the groomer is it actually grooms the grass as well, so we can run it over grass areas too. And but as Sean said, it's keeping them away as much as we can will lessen the amount of things we have to groom for sure. But more to come. The cost for dogs is astronomical. You can get into the many tens of thousands of dollars pretty quickly, depending on how many days they service the park. So we're looking at some lower cost options at this point.
Maybe if you and John just go out there and start yelling at all the geese as they come flying by, you can stop it.
Can we just move the dog park?
Yeah. That was an option too.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
We just put up some signs to tell the geese don't land here.
Yeah, that's fine too.
Charge a landing fee.
They do that with deer on the highway. They say deer are crossing for the next 5 miles, and for the rest of it, they don't cross, only for those 5 miles. Just put up signs that geese aren't allowed for these 400 feet. That would work.
And that works well.
It turned 8 o'clock, and I know we're not done yet. I promise, but we're getting silly, but that's good. But let's keep going, John.
There's just a few more areas, just a couple of quick ones. Staying on page 169, maybe Elizabeth, you could just talk about the uptick in background checks.
Yes, so there was a new law signed in last year that effective this October 1, all of our volunteer coaches will need to be background checked at a higher expense. So we're going to need to be doing that for our volunteers in addition to our paid staff, which we've always done. And we always have paid staff working when the volunteers are there. But so we felt like there was adequate supervision. But now that we're going to follow the new rule that was instituted, yeah, we're going to have to incur that cost.
Thanks. And then on page 171 in the celebrations account, between the supplies and the contractual services, there are some increases, mainly because we're looking to expand on some of the special events that we're doing. For those of you that went to the tree lighting this year at Bartlam Park, that was expanded, well attended. We're looking to build on that some more. The summer concerts, the bid for productions for the stage lighting and the sound went up $2,000 per show, so that's an additional $8,000. If we still wanted to do 4 summer concerts, we're keeping the entertainment cost right around $3,000, which has been the cost for the last 4 or 5 years for the bands that do come in. And then there was a slight increase in the fireworks that takes care of the Fall Fest firework display that comes out of this budget. And that's really basically it, unless there was some other questions. Those are really the highlights of the things that where lines were increased.
John, if you could just maybe quickly touch on, I'm sorry to jump in, but you did have a successful sponsorship season with Bartlett Beats last year. So just to remind folks, there are some revenues that you've been able to offset some of that added cost.
Yeah, so a couple of things. The Bartlett Beats, we brought in $15,000 last year with the banner system that we have with the power station stage. So we're going to be kicking that off probably next month. So hopefully there's an outpouring of support, and we could get that number to drive up north. We also last year had done a bid for the mobile ice cream vending. We brought in $6,100 last year, and Mr. Zindros is going to be coming back to us next week or in a couple of weeks with another $6,100 for this next season, and then we'll put it back out to bid again.
Is that included in that 294,000 in revenue that comes from Park and Rec Department was in the?
I believe, yeah, I think Elizabeth, you did include that, I think.
Yes, that is included.
Okay.
And if you had just a minute on the revenue still, I was specifically speaking about program revenue before, but one of the reasons that there's not as much of a change this year is we were optimistic on some of our facility use. So with that field rental fee that we instituted last year for the tournaments, we had thought that we might bring in close to $25,000, and we've only seen just shy of 6,000 so far. So that's a big chunk that we didn't realize. So looking to the year ahead, we said, let's not budget for that. If it didn't happen last year, that's a big chunk. So we brought that down to a more realistic. Our youth center rentals, it was about $10,000 that we had figured we were going to bring in. We haven't even started with the people in the building yet. So that's going to be closer to 1,000. So that's one of the reasons there were some differences there in what we had budgeted. There were some facility shortfalls there in the revenues generated from the facilities.
Okay. Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, quick question. I know that it's been pointed out to me that this is the 250th year of the country's birth, this 4th of July coming up. And also we have the Vietnam Memorial. I believe that's the thing that's going to show up in June. Is that something that falls within a budget of yours? Because I know chances are a celebration of any kind is going to be conducted on Bartlett Park property, I would imagine. I don't know how big the 4th of July celebration might be. I know John White has, advised the town manager and some other folks in his email chain that there is the 4th of July thing coming up.
Mr. White's email was, if you read it closely, he's actually talking about 2026. So it's
it's a ways off.
He's ahead of the curve.
That's way ahead of me. I just took I thought he was giving 6 months notice.
John likes to give us a nice lead time to prepare. We should start talking about it, but I think we've got 4.
That's true. This year ends
4
with
years.
3. Right. Okay.
But on your other comment, the Vietnam Wall was not something that we knew was coming when we planned this year's budget. I have been, working with the police chief and others to make sure. We know there'll be some added costs and some overtime and some other things. I think I will like to summarize, and I know that the council's been very supportive of that. Obviously, big effort coming here to town. I don't anticipate it's tons of money, but I do think I'd like to account for it, and to the extent the town ends up sort of donating that to the cause, I think that's something that I would imagine the council is supportive of. So that would probably come out of this year's budget, because that will be June 1st. And we're just kind of monitoring the police overtime and others that would be kind of the larger drivers, if there are any. But otherwise, to your point, Mr. Slocum, we haven't budgeted anything specifically for the Vietnam Wall the first week of June. But I'm confident we can account for it within the existing operating budget.
And we probably could come up with something that happened in 73 that we could budget for. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Mr. Velber?
Yeah, just a quick question for John. this goes back to the concert series. Two things. One, what you mentioned that there's a, obviously the production costs are going up for about $2,000 per concert. What account? Obviously there's just curious what accounts for that. Just they decided that just the costs are going up, or
Their costs have been going up, and they've held the price, I think, for the last 3 years. So,
okay. So, but and my other question
they were the only bidder as well.
Okay. And the other question I had is, last year we tried out the last concert on the Chapman piece. This year, are you planning on keeping it on where you've had it in the past, or are we looking to shift this to the Chapman piece?
So that's an open discussion. We could go either or. Public Works should probably have to keep it mowed tight, because there were some complaints about it being buggy the actual night of the concert. But what happened was that they did a really nice job and cut it really tight, but then we had rain and we had to postpone the concert. And then the grass had like 4 or 5 days of growth. And so, I'm not sure, one way or the other, but it does give us a really good option if we, if the other side is wet, or we do get, a period of 3 or 4 days of rain and that Bartlett area is saturated. This kind of would give us another option to stage the rain out concert, but that could be up for discussion.
Okay.
That we did stage it.
I was just curious if the plan, if the plan was that if that was successful enough to move it to that direction, into that spot permanently, or it's still up in the air. But I'm sure you'll figure it out.
We're game. Yeah, we're game for anything.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. Oh, yes, Mr. Jenks. I do see another hand.
Yeah, I got a real serious question here, John. So when's the big pickleball national tournament coming to town?
It is coming this fall. We're actually working on one. Yes, it is.
Nice.
We're going to have a Cheshire Open. I think, Elizabeth, is it September or October? We haven't really finalized the weekend yet.
I think that the dates, I think there was one in September and one in early October, if I'm remembering right. But yeah, it was September, I think, was what we were leaning toward.
So we're going to do a singles event on Saturday and a mixed doubles on Sunday.
You have to bring in some bleachers for that or something, or no?
No, I don't think so. Talking with a promoter who does this for a living. We're going to use her consulting fees. It's going to be a small fee, but she's available by phone, and she's going to help us organize and kind of coach us through so that we could do it with our own staff. And so she's given us some good information on how to stage one. So start practicing.
It's going to be pretty well attended, I bet. So it's looking forward to it.
So yeah, one of the reasons we found her was so that we weren't running into other events and competing against other events, maybe going on in the state or in the New England region, so that we could, be an attractive a venue.
I just pulled it back up, and it was September that she recommended because there aren't other tournaments in Connecticut in September.
So we'll be giving out the green jacket, the Cheshire Open.
All right.
So just to really wrap up for me, Sean alluded it to before. We had pretty spirited field distribution meetings last month, and just so that you know that there's almost a 300% growth in Cheshire youth softball. There's a ton of little girls playing. Coach Drust at the high school is doing a really good job with not only with her coaches but with her varsity athletes being coaches. After their high school season, their games are done. These girls are coaching, and they're going to be coaching teams throughout the season through June, the middle of June. So there really is a need to access these school fields to get them desirable, at least for practice, not so much the games, but at least practice. And then there's going to be the required maintenance as well. So something that as you go through the deliberations, we're talking with the Board of Ed. We need to do some sort of an assessment of at least the Norton Field, the Highland Fields, the Doolittle Field, and the Chapman. Those are the four that we've kind of identified that we need to bring them up to a practice quality field. And currently, 2 of them are and 2 of them are not.
So
So-
that's a cost that comes from somewhere. So where are we proposing that cost?
So we had a planning meeting with Jeff and Vin and some of their team. We did both budget. You'll see some in the Board of Ed's budget and also in George's budget, kind of a 50-50 to at least bring regular maintenance and a little upgrade of those maintenance. Historically, and George could jump in, the town has maintained those fields in the summer months just for many years now. But as is often apparent, that the fields need to be ready really by the beginning of April. Starting tomorrow in a normal year, you're starting to have people clamoring for field space. So I think just the summer month maintenance isn't enough anymore. And as John said, it's one thing to have them ready for maybe the occasional adult league softball or something, but now we're starting to have just additional use, and it becomes a safety consideration if those fields and the infields aren't cut and the clay isn't spread properly and all of that. So the Board of Ed has been good to partner with us, and they put a little money in their budget, and we did the same. George, I forget the number, but it was somewhere around 20.
So it's not a turf war, not a turf war at all. There's shared responsibility and budgeted on this budget that's in your budget, John?
George's
You said we needed
currently.
Okay, because I knew we needed to talk about it, but I wanted to make sure it was in the budget because we're just hearing about it now. So it's in the budget.
It is. So
Okay.
I think it's about
Okay.
25,000 in total, but it's 12.5 each, somewhere in that range.
Okay, so it's being accommodated in this budget cycle.
So Tim, that's just for the maintenance portion of it, but some of the fields are going to need some protective screening. They might need some backstop. We don't need full fences. We may need some additional bases, home plates, some of those other amenities that go into making a field. So the money that
So
George.
that's not in a budget.
Yeah,
That's
that
correct.
ties into what I was saying about a possible capital appropriation. Early John had said that he came up with a list of around $47,000-$50,000 of additional equipment purchase. He did ask for it in the budget, but again, I wasn't able to fund it. I funded it in part, and now he has a proposal to switch that with the administrative assistant position to deal with the workload they have there. But again, I think the need is out there, and I think you're hearing it, certainly from John, and I think the Board of Ed is seeing it as well in terms of the request for those fields. So I think more to come there, and I think if we could see fit to some additional appropriation in the capital budget, it would really go a long way to addressing this need.
Okay. Perfect.
That's all I have. Thank you all for your consideration. Good luck.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Milone?
Elizabeth.
I do have one other thing while we have John here. And I don't know what protocol is, but, I know you have the design effort going, and it's not a budget related item, but the design effort going on Bartlett. And would it be appropriate and would it be possible to have the team come in the near future and give us an update on progress, schedule, how they're looking with what we can accomplish for the money that's available, things like that. I want to make sure that we keep close to that so that when we get to construction, we're on budget and on time. So I know they're just getting started, but I'm thinking maybe in May, after we get through the budget season, if the council's okay with that, I would love to stay close to that if that's possible.
Certainly, we by May, we would have had our third meeting. There's also conversations going back and forth on layouts for the field. So there are things that we could report on and bring to you. And I don't see that as a problem at all.
John, if I may, at the next council meeting, I will establish an executive committee of 3 council members to at least begin the conversations along this planning line so that you guys can apprise the council as we go along. So that will be established at our April 12th meeting, and I'll reach out to you and 2 others.
Excellent.
Very good. Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments regarding this part of Park and Rec? All right, then we'll move on to the pool. And Sheila, mostly it looks like the increase is the lifeguard cost.
Yes, it is. That is, if you look at it on page 177 of the budget book, the biggest increase of like $31,000 is the lifeguard and part-time employee line, just because of the fact that actually minimum wage goes up twice in next fiscal year. It goes up July 1st and then it goes up again on June 1st. So we have two
Yeah.
hits in the fiscal year of the minimum wage going up. So it's a $2 increase. So that is my biggest increase is the lifeguards. And I've actually cut it. I am not using the desk attendants as much. I'm kind of rotating lifeguards out there, so I could cut that a little bit. It would actually be almost $15,000 more if I didn't do that. The only other bigger increases were to 5202, and that is primarily because the cost of everything is going up. Chlorine has gone up in the last 6 months from about $130 a pail to $200 a pail. And then we are also paying surcharges, fuel charges, and everything else on anything that's delivered to the pool. CO2 has gone up 15% over the last 8 months. So it's really all increases due to increases in everything, gas and everything else. The next line that was somewhat of an increase is on page 178, I believe. Which is 5403. And that increase is the fire marshal's office has asked us to put in a monitoring system at the front entrance so we can know exactly how many people are in the facility at a time. And that's primarily for the big meets that we have, just so we have control of it and we know exactly who's coming in and who's going out. And in general, it's actually kind of a good thing to know how many people are in there at a time. Though for me, those are really the biggest increases. Everything else has pretty much stayed the same. On a good note, we are extremely busy. We are going into our next set of lessons next Monday, and I have a wait list of about 100 kids that want swim lessons that I can't accommodate. So we're in a good place right now with all of that. But unfortunately, everything is increasing in price on us.
And I do know the subsidy, if I looked at it correctly, is even. So it's not going up, which is good.
Right.
So that's a big plus. Due to the usage, I guess, is covering the increase in costs.
Yes, correct.
All right.
Sheila, did you want to mention? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, John, I'm calling. Yeah.
Sheila, did you want to mention the town beautification landscaping project coming up this spring?
Correct. So we, I don't know if any of you guys have been near the pool recently, but we just took out everything was in front of the building. We took out all the shrubs. Everything's been taken out because it was just so overgrown. And there was a concern for, people being in the bushes, all that kind of stuff, because we did unfortunately have a break-in last summer. And the beautification committee has come out and we're basically just planting trees with some low growing plants up against the building. And the trees are going to be out in the grass area, and we are actually grassing where all of the flowers were. So it's easier to maintain for the facility tech person, and it's also going to have a cleaner, neater look to it.
Then one other thing, do you want to talk about the roof? Would that be appropriate, Sean, for this conversation or no?
No, we can't. I mean, it's got longer term, capital item impact, but certainly, I think we have to finalize the plan going forward. Some of it I know is exploratory, but certainly you could bring it up now as a quick summary if you'd like of kind of.
Yeah. So about 3 or 4 months ago, we started having some water coming in the lobby, which, if any, for all of you that had been a part of this facility since day one, that was a very large issue when we first opened, to the point where in 2009, we had to gut the entire building and get mold remediation and everything else in there. We had a new roof put in. It's a roof that has a vapor barrier and everything else. Well, we believe what is happening is there's a catwalk up on the building, which we needed for the bubble. It was so that they could get up and they could access where they attach the bubble to the building. And that is low enough to where the roof attaches to the Great Wall that it was very difficult to get in there and seal it the way that it needs to be sealed. There's no flashing up there. It's just caulked. So we believe that that is where the water is coming in. So the plan of action has been to remove the catwalk, which we've gotten a price, I believe, John, what did you say? One was 10,000 and one was 40,000.
One was 11,000, the other one was 43,000.
Yeah, to remove it. And then we are really not 100% sure of what type of damage there is underneath once we get that off of there. There's no damage inside the building. So if you go up into the attic, there is no water coming into the building. So it's all exterior. So the biggest unknown right now is what are we going to find when we do open that up? And we've had 3 roofing people come out there, and we've gotten 3 different opinions, as I guess we always do. So that is where we are at with the roof.
Yeah, I would just add, it's a very, well, as with a lot of things at the pool, it's a very unique slope and structure up there. Basically flattens out. And again, we're not talking about obviously the big white roof. We're talking about the roof over the front entrance there in the office. I think ultimately, again, in my non-roof expert opinion, having it not flatten out up there under the catwalk probably would make the most sense, trying to have a more of a traditional roof slope. If removing the catwalk is required, that's great. I think one of the experts said you may not need to remove the catwalk, I think. So it's really is hard to know. It's a little preliminary until we know exactly what we have, but definitely worth keeping folks updated as to what we're exploring with what's going on above that roof system.
And then one last thing, the front doors.
Oh, yes. So the doors to the building are literally falling apart. They were, with all this wind that we had, one of the doors got caught in the wind, not last weekend, the weekend before, and was literally almost ripped right off the building. So we had somebody come out there. The damage to it is really, what we have to do is completely remove the frame of the door, replace the hinge and all that kind of stuff, which is going to be very costly. So the thought now is to go to doors like they have at the youth center, where you walk up to them and they slide to the side, you come in and then they slide back, and there's no chance that the wind can catch them. That the wind in that park, there are times that, I mean, I live right down the street from the pool, and I'll walk outside and there's no wind at all. And I get to the pool and I almost get blown over when I get out of my car. It's like a wind tunnel there. And those doors do get caught very often. And there just happened to be really high winds. Somebody opened the door and the door almost flew right off the building.
So we have someone from Stanley coming out next week. The doors at the town hall, I think the cost is about $7,300. So we're looking at least that, and we might have to use the services of an electrician or add some power there. So it could be upwards to about $8,000.
Okay, Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, just a quick question on the roof thing. Obviously, in 2009, we did roofing that was not associated with the catwalk area. Is that what you stated?
So we completely ripped that roof off. So that whole area was completely gutted. And when they put the new roof on, because of the catwalk being there, George, you might be able to say better to this than I can, that there's no flashing up there, that it's just caulked. And so the water was able to get behind the caulking. That's the way that Frank Gilroy explained it to me.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with a 30-year warranty or 20-year warranty or anything like that?
Correct.
Really? That seems terrible. We got our own building inspectors looking at this. We didn't decide that caulk was no good and flashing would be better. That's okay. That's a shame on somebody.
Right.
All right.
Okay. We can take it up in
Walker.
capital.
We had discussed this, and it might be more capital as well, but earlier with the wastewater treatment plant about ongoing maintenance, and I know last year we had discussed about maintenance, and I know John, I believe you had said that you had a plan and about things that have to be maintained at the pool on a regular basis, and like Mr. Parati had said earlier, if you don't maintain something, it could cost 10 times as much to repair it later on. And I just want to make sure that there is a schedule on that, and that we are, like you just said, the doors have been like that for a while and things like that. I mean, we need to make sure we stay on top of stuff so it doesn't get to that point. But I just want to know where we are with that.
So sure, pool wise, mechanical room wise, pump wise, we do have a schedule that Weston and Sampson had provided with us for, I think it was a year and a half ago. So we do have that, and Sheila and I are on top of that. And there's some things that unfortunately, because that pool is running all the time, there are things that just wear out and things that age. But we do have that scheduled. So next up, I think, is the water heater, Sheila.
Water heaters, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't want to have any big surprises as long as we keep up with the maintenance, and then I'm fine with that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo that, we have that for all of the, major mechanicals and a lot of the items that we, as you said, Mr. Walsh, that we were getting surprised with. But yeah, I mean, to be clear, this roof issue was not on that list. It's not really a maintenance item so much as a discovery of a poor installation, I think. So, but your point is well taken. We do have that schedule. I think we'll have less mechanical surprises going forward. But
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much, John, Sheila, Elizabeth. Appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you. So our next meeting is Tuesday with the Board of Ed, and that is in person. And so I assume that's in the council chambers. And
that's correct.
Board of Ed review ready. And that will be our last department. And then we will start, what I'll do is I'll start compiling with the town manager items that we've all talked about, and kind of like a chairman's draft, if you will, which I've done the last few years, taking all of your comments into consideration and talking about what the different options are as we try to move forward with coming to some conclusion here. All right.
Bowery, before you
Yes, sir.
close the meeting, after you close, I would like that Sean, could you hang in along with Don? I want to go over a schedule consideration with you. That's just so everyone doesn't leave. The meeting will be over. It's non-business. It's just a best use of time issue.
Okay. All right, then, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Oh, gee, I guess I could have said that then.
Yeah.
I forgot you got to handle.
Well, it's a full council meeting, so I usually.
Well, it's
give it
okay. I
back.
lost track of the 1776 too, so I guess I could lose track of anything. That's embarrassing, by the way. But anyway, I guess our meeting is over, and I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Pavano, second from Mr. Jenks. All in favor?